We've got Paul, pronouns he, him, calling in from all the way over in the UK, who's a theist who wants to make the case for metaphysical idealism. I'm not a fan of it, but let's hear it out. Paul, you're on the line with Forrest and Aaron. How you doing? Paul, if you're using the web caller right now, we can't hear you because your phone is asleep. So tap your phone, wake it up. Once your phone's awake, we will be able to hear you.
Is it any better now? Hello,
yes.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Oh, great. Okay, yeah, I'm doing very well, guys. How are you doing yourselves?
Please make that stop.
He's very interested in joining in on the call.
I will pull my eyeballs out.
Hello?
Hello.
I've just gone somewhere where the dog can't follow me.
Perfect. Thank you.
Hi, can you hear? Hello? Can you hear me now?
Yes. Yes, I can.
Great. Okay. So yeah, it's not too dissimilar an area to speak about than where the last caller was coming from. Hopefully, I can make my case with a little more clarity, though, and hopefully we can have a bit of a change of pace and have a calm and collected and respectful back and forth about it.
Fuck you.
No, can't do it. This is all about arguing.
Yeah, fuck you too.
Yeah. All right, sure. Let's try. Let's see what's up. What are you thinking?
Yeah. Okay, so it might take a little bit of time. If either of you guys are quite familiar with the case that's forwarded by Dr. Kastrup, if you've ever heard of this guy.
No, I'm sorry. I don't know.
No,
the name is familiar, but I've read nothing by him.
Oh, I see. Okay. I also haven't read anything, but I've listened to a lot of his...
Did we lose you? Is your phone asleep again?
I'll tap your phone.
Paul, are you there?
Yeah.
Sorry about that. Did the phone go to sleep again?
I think so.
It did, I think. But we hear you now.
Oh, great. Okay. So yeah, I was just sort of crediting, if you will. Sorry, I need to deal with the dog. Hogan.
What is this call?
Am I still with you?
What is this call?
Am I still with you?
You are.
You are.
You're still with us.
All right. Sorry about that. He found his way into the room, the dog, and it was going to make the call annoying again. Right. Yeah. So metaphysical idealism, quite similar to where the previous guy was coming from, where we were talking about simulations and such. Effectively, it's the ontology that posits consciousness as the primitive rather than material as the primitive. Hello?
Okay.
Right.
Right. Okay, great. So step one, I think you both be able to agree with me on this and how I begin to make my case, at least. There's some experience is happening. That much is given. That much is known. It's the thing I'm least able to doubt. It's kind of like similar to Cartesian, but I don't even assume a subject. I'm just going to say some experience is happening.
Okay.
Is that a fair enough place to have like as a bedrock of an epistemology, do you think?
Yeah, why not? I know things I think therefore I am.
I'm going to make one thing difficult. If something is having experience, there must be a subject, because otherwise there's just an experience, and an experience can only exist with a subject experiencing. But this is, I think, a pointless digression.
You're way ahead of me here. That is actually my second step, is to say that it's a conjecture, but it's a reasonable conjecture, that if there's an experience, then there's an experiencer.
Right. Sure.
Yeah? Okay, cool. My third step is to avoid solipsism with an axiom. Okay? So the axiom is that mine is not the only...
Oh my God, Paul, wake your phone up. Your phone's asleep. Wake your phone up. I'm losing.
Okay, I've woken up the phone again. Sorry about that. So the third step, I don't know how much
Appreciate it. Thank you.
Cool. It's to avoid...
You were starting your third
I want to avoid solipsism.
Yes.
So
with an axiom.
And I can't solve it. I have no solution for hard solipsism. So I just come up with an axiom. And the axiom says, mind's not the only perspective from which an experience is happening. Not claiming to know that for a fact, but it kind of seems that way. And if it isn't that way, then like, what are we doing anyway? There's no pursuit of knowledge, and I don't really want to give up the pursuit of knowledge, so I just use an axiom.
Okay,
is that reasonable? Hello?
I'm willing to roll with it
now. Let's see where we're going.
Yeah.
Okay, great. So the fourth step is to notice intersubjective agreements. Okay, so if we axiomatize that, we're not the only beings having conscious experiences, that other beings are having those experiences, it does seem that we agree on certain things, like, there's an apple on the table is brown, the apple is red, etc., etc. And something would seem to be responsible for the fact that we're having those agreements. And I think there are two main lines philosophically of explaining those. The mainstream one is to say that there's a mind-independent material universe that holds the facts of the matter. That holds, a certain matrix of values, if you will, from which our experiences are derived. That's one way of explaining the agreements. And the competing way is the way that my opinion goes with, which is that there is something outside of my mind and yours, but that thing is not outside of mind altogether. It's what you might call a mind at large. So there's an objective world. It is real, but it's not physical. It's mental.
So the issue that I have, Paul.
Sorry, go on. Yep.
I'm sorry. I didn't mean to interrupt you. I thought you were at the end of a thought.
No, it's fine. It's fine. If you've got a question or a comment, then I'd rather hear it.
So I've talked to different idealists before that are making a similar argument as you, and I just want to make sure I'm on the same page then, because it seems like the logical end of this is, if nobody is looking at the moon, is the moon still there?
Mm-hmm.
I'm asking you,
right,
in your framework that you're proposing, does the moon exist if nobody's looking at it?
I would say that it does, but not in the way that we usually experience it.
What if, hypothetically, we all become mole people, all humans live underground, nobody ever sees the sky again, and nobody learns one day the knowledge of the moon is lost. So all humans, nobody sees the sky, and nobody knows that the moon exists. Does the moon exist?
Paul, I think your phone might have gone to sleep again.
I'm going to lose it, dude. Keep
okay, sorry about that. There must be some way of going into the settings and sorting that out, but I haven't found it yet. Okay, so the question was, we all become mole people, we move underground, we lose knowledge of the moon. With the moon.
So no person, no human being alive has ever seen the moon, nor do they even have a concept of what the moon is. Nobody knows the moon exists. Does the moon still exist?
It does, Jim, but not as we know it. So effectively, as an idealist, what I believe that what we call material things, that they're actually processes in consciousness. Bill Hicks described it very, very well in one of his bits. He did a bit, I don't know if you've ever heard it, on positive drug stories.
Nope, but I do have a follow-up question whenever you're done.
Okay, cool. Okay, so during that bit, he talks about how it's always negative stories on the news about drugs, and then says, why don't we have a positive drug story? And then he gives his own positive story. He says, today, a young man on acid realized that we're all just one consciousness experiencing itself subjectively, that there's no such thing as death, life is only a dream, and we are the imagination of ourselves. Here's Tom with the weather.
Neat.
Yeah, and I kind of think that that's not only good comedy, I think that I kind of agree with that on the philosophical front as well. So something still exists. that when we would perceive it, we would call the moon, but that it's a process in consciousness. So the physical aspect of it is rendered by observation. From my perspective, physicality is the language of perception. So it's a model, essentially. It's either a colloquial model as we navigate the world, or it's a...
Tap your phone.
I think his phone went to sleep again.
Tap your phone. Tap your phone. Tap your phone. Tap your phone. Tap your phone.
Yeah, sorry. What did I get up to?
So you're talking about how this is a mental process. It's a process to see the things and to experience the things.
Okay. Yeah. So there's still something there. There's still something in the objective world. But the disagreement would be whether or not that thing is actually physical, because physicality under this philosophy would just be the language of perception. So,
okay.
How Castor? Sorry, go on. Did you have a follow-up question?
Yeah. So back to the mole moon thing. We're all mole people, and so physicality is just the language of perception. I get that. We're mole people. No one's ever seen the moon. No one's ever heard of the moon. Nobody knows what the moon is. Assuming what you just said is true, one person one day digs up and pops up on the surface, and for the first time in as far as they know, all of humanity, this is the first human being now seeing the surface of the planet. It's nighttime. They look up. What do they see?
Well, they see the moon, but they probably don't know it as such. So they see a phenomenon.
Right, but what would they understand that to be? I think your phone went to sleep again because you got cut off there in the middle of
tap
word.
the phone again. That's when you answer this question.
But what they're seeing, they're seeing the moon
shape in the sky.
Right, but that is a physical thing, right?
Is it?
Yes, I mean, it's a physical. Otherwise,
Paul, is what you said. It exists independent of observers as ourselves. It was existing independent of our mind, because then once our mind happened to point in that direction, there it was.
Like I'm all down for the vibes, man, of saying like we only experience reality the way that we experience it, and the way that we communicate reality changes our experience of it. The language that we choose to use alters our perceptions and our experiences. I agree with all those things, but then taking that extra step out into bullshit to say therefore things aren't really what they are, they're just what we think they are collectively, that doesn't really work. Things are what they are, and what we think about them collectively is different. Well, that's what it sounds like it's going to. So please explain where I'm misunderstanding.
Sure. Well, I mean, it's perfectly reasonable for you to think that might be where I was going, but actually what I do is I take that point of intersubjective agreements and then make two different assumptions and follow those through and analyze which is superior in several respects. So I look at the conceptual parsimony, the logical coherence, the internal consistency, the explanatory power, the empirical support. And there was one more, which I've actually forgotten. It will come back to me.
For what specifically? For what claim do you have all of these things?
Right. Okay. So those two alternative secondary axioms are an attempt to explain the intersubjective agreements that we have between our experiences. One is the mainstream materialist idea that the thing outside of your mind and mine is a independent material reality. And then the more idealistic view is that the thing that's outside of your mind and mine is more mind stuff, just external to mine and your individuations of mind.
It sounds to me like you were arguing for the former while saying that you're arguing for the latter. I don't understand where the disconnect is between the two of us here. Maybe I'm just missing something egregious. Maybe I'm very dumb. I am very dumb. Maybe I'm very dumb on this specific call. Like it sounds to me like you are saying either objective reality exists and it is a physical objective thing outside of our minds, or our minds are actually influencing it. And then when we take the argument of the moon, no, the moon is actually definitely there. We just might perceive it differently if we don't have any context. And that is arguing for the first thing, that there is objective reality outside of our minds that is physical and eternal, and that we are interacting with it but not shaping it.
I see. Okay. So yeah, what I'm saying is similar to, say, like in a Grand Theft Auto game, the world that exists in data form only, which isn't currently being interacted with by the system, hasn't yet been rendered. And so it kind of exists, but it doesn't exist as you experience it when the game is rendering what you're actually observing. So something of the noumenal exists. That is where the moon is, and that's I would say, according to my philosophy, that's a process in consciousness, not a process in our consciousness, but a process in the consciousness of mind at large.
For that to be the case, it sounds like, at least from where I'm sitting, it sounds like that would mean that we would have to have a special place in our minds for literally everything that could possibly exist, just in case we ever come across it, for that part of our mind to start doing a thing.
If it was all in our minds, yes. Our minds are localizations. So have you heard of the psychiatric disorder of dissociative identity disorder?
Yes, I have.
Okay. So what I'm suggesting is similar to that, in that with that you have a host mind, which is self-generated, self-contained alters. So effectively, we as localizations of consciousness are the dissociated alters. And the mind at large, if you will, is the host mind.
Okay. So it's like the Force, only with minds.
I'm not sure. Is it like the Force? Well, you know what I'm saying is the primitive.
We're like the fucking the mind flayers. There's the one super mind that we're all just connected to and are a part of, and we can be more or less distant from it. But at the end of the day, we're all connected to the super mind, and the super mind is what actually is reality.
Yeah, like in the Bill Hicks thing, where essentially we're all one consciousness experiencing itself subjectively, and that's the reason for the intersubjective agreements under this philosophy, because rather than there being a physical apple on the table, what we're both interacting with when we look at what's on that table is that part, if you will, of mind at large, which is on the outside of either of our dissociated bubbles, where we both get to render that particular source reality, if you will. And so we can agree.
Okay,
Paul,
if I can do just a little bit of cutting to the chase sort of thing, because this sounds close to like Berkeley's version of idealism, where basically God is the mind at large that basically makes it so all the other minds will interact and have the same sort of intersubjective experience when encountering the same sort of thing. And if that's the case, then I think you're going to have issues when you say this is a good system based on parsimony, because premise one for this whole thing to work is God exists. And if we can't show that to be the case, that is a huge thing to throw in and say that's parsimonious, because there's one thing I've noticed about minds is that they are absurdly complicated. And I can say that because rocks don't seem to exhibit what we consider consciousness. Brains do. And the way brains are able to do that is because they are so mega complex and interconnected. And if you have another mind out there, it must be even more amazingly powerfully interconnected and complex. That seems the exact opposite of a parsimonious thing, that there's just stuff out there that bumps into each other.
Yeah. Okay, so while I would agree that I think Berkeley was onto something, I think the way he made his case wasn't particularly good. So by starting with the premise one of God exists, I think essentially, like you say, you're adding a layer of complexity there. In the case of how, for example, Dr. Castrop makes the parsimony argument, it's a bit different because it subtracts more than it adds. So going back to the intersubjective agreements line, only one of the postulates there is positing a new ontology, a new fresh ontology from the known. That's why I went through the first few initial steps to say that the experience happening is the known thing. So the experiential is what we know, and the material is more like it's a useful theory, and it is one way of explaining the subjective agreements. But the known category of ontology is experiential. So
here's the thing, though, because the thing is, though, all the premises you have are also completely consistent with materialism, because we can also go and say the reason we also have all that intersubjective, or at least some level of intersubjective agreement, is that there are material things out there that minds built in similar ways will experience in similar ways because they have similar structures. Moreover, as we continue to do science and we see, hey, it looks like the way that we have consciousness is that there's this organ in our skulls that seems to be very strongly related to our consciousness and conscious experiences, because when we change the meat, we change the way we experience the external world, which really suggests, hey, what's going on is here and it's ultimately materialistic. And I don't know how any idealism explains that without basically saying, well, science is right, but scientists don't know science. I really see that being a parsimonious issue.
Okay, you've said quite a lot there, and I think that there are ways that idealism can cope with the phenomenon that you mentioned. So, first of all, I'd be an idiot if I denied that there's mind state and brain state correlations. You know, we're finding more and more of those, like, every day, it seems, and we're developing a lot of technology based on being able to even make images of what people are seeing or what they're thinking about, etc. So there's definitely correlation there, but the correlation in and of itself doesn't prove that there's a causal relationship. Now, you said there are ways of affecting the meat, and I do have to say, yeah, there are a lot of phenomena where it seems like you've got a physical system interacting with another physical system, having an impact on a mental one. However, that intuition that those systems that we're dealing with in the first place are in fact material or physical systems, that's based on a cultural default. It is itself a metaphysical assumption that effectively is begging the question, because they only
actually,
give us
it's quite the
examples
opposite,
of material
because our
things.
cultural assumption has been that we are mental beings, not a bunch of physical things adding up to something that forms mental. So quite the opposite. It's been actually pulling teeth to actually get us to realize it looks like we're actually material rather than something mental or spiritual, to use another term. So I think
you don't think materialism is culturally default?
I think it's the conclusion of what science has gotten to. Go.
Hello?
Oh, I heard you. I'm saying it's the conclusion science has reached because of all the science we have done. Go back a couple centuries, see how many people thought that we were just a pile of meat.
Yeah. Oh, I see what you mean. I was talking about the modern cultural default, not the hereditary one where we come from. So I think that
the reason that's now the default is that that's been the paradigm that's actually worked itself out and has actually fought against the default and even against our own intuitions about what the mind is or how the mind works. We've gone against all those intuitions because of scientific progress.
Okay, Aaron, the thing I was taking issue with here is that I'm saying that you were using a materialistic assumption in order to prove a materialistic conclusion. In that, this whole idea that if we interact, say, with like we take a drink or we take a pill or we get hit by a baseball bat, then we've got an example of a physical system interacting with a physical system. but that is to put the cart before the horse in terms of assuming materialism in order to prove our materialism, if you see what I mean.
Here's the thing, though. Can you show any mental states independent of brain states? Because one paradigm explains everything, and yours requires, it just happens to look exactly like the materialist system. It feels, okay, so because I'm an American, I have to bring up this movie. Have you seen The Wizard of Oz?
Not in a long time.
Yeah, American. How does that connect?
Oh, because it reminds me of pay no attention to the man behind the curtain. Everything has to basically be ignored for the system to work. It's like, hey, materialism works for everything. It explains everything so brilliantly, including why we have these particular correlation states, which, and there's no way that an idealist was making those predictions, say, in 1800. Only a materialist could say brain states should map completely to mental states. If mental states can exist independent of the brain, why don't we ever experience or see any mental states independent of brain states? I think I caused your phone to go to sleep again.
Okay, sorry about that. Yeah, hopefully I'm back. My question, Aaron, is that it seems like you're suggesting that an idealist is incapable or prohibited somehow from utilizing a material model. But
what I'm saying is that basically the idealist can't do anything other than sit back, let the materialist do all the work, and say the idealist said, oh yeah, I can explain that too. And it feels not just lazy, but insulting to say materialism can't explain these things, but the idealist does nothing to explain it until the materialist has already done the work.
Right. Okay. I don't think that we need to assume materialism in order to make material models, though. That's the thing. I think that science is metaphysically mute. I think that we can
this is
look
why
at whether or not.
This is why I stated something clearly. Can you show me an example of a mental state independent of a brain state?
Why would you think I'd need to do that?
Because here's the thing.
You are saying correlated. They are correlated.
That mental is fundamental. So why is it that the case that mental only ever appears when it's completely correlated with one particular organ?
Okay. Yeah, I can tell you exactly why that is the case under idealism. Under materialism, the correlation exists because the brain state causes the mind state. Under idealism, the correlation exists because the brain state is the appearance of the mind state. It's what the mind state looks like from an extrinsic perspective. So the
problem is that has no predictive power, because that does not tell me, hey, if I take this probe, put it in your brain, what is it going to change with your experience? And why is it that, like, if I put you in like the correct, like, resonating magnetic field, I can change your creativity, or I can cause you to see colors that aren't there, or all sorts of other weird things. Why would you even expect that?
That's moving the goalpost. It's moving the goalpost. If you want to start,
I'm saying the idealist can't even find where the goalpost is. The materialist has to show where the goalpost is, where the field is, cut the grass, paint the lines, do all the actual work, and then the idealist comes along and says, "Oh yeah, us too."
Okay, well, I mean, you say that it's materialist doing all the work. I don't necessarily think that's the case. I think that the work is done without metaphysical assumptions. I think that those who are doing the work can make materialist metaphysical assumptions, but they don't have to. So I'm not.
But everything
not really
we do
sure
to the brain is with material. Everything we do is predicting based on non-thinking stuff working together to create consciousness and affecting things with non-conscious stuff into that non-conscious stuff, changing ultimately conscious experience. Again, this is all of what you would expect on materialism, and you have to basically force it into idealism.
Everything you just said about the interactions there, you've said like a material substance interacts with a material substance. But what you didn't tell me is your case behind why you were saying that these things are fundamentally material in the first place. See,
Well,
what you're having to do
go and grab.
in order to produce evidence for materialism, you first have to assume materialism.
Paul, do you have a rock nearby?
Hello?
Do you have a rock
what, you
nearby?
Can ask me to go and kick it? Are you going to ask me to go and kick it?
Not necessarily. No. I was going to ask you to look at the rock and tell me, is it conscious or not?
I'm right. I see where you might be going with this, because panpsychists believe that inanimate objects are conscious. I don't think a rock is conscious. I think it's a process in consciousness. And that when we, as processes in consciousness ourselves, interact with that rock, that it appears to us on our screen of perception in physical form, because physicality is the language of perception.
So here's the thing, though. It seems like we both agree the rock is not conscious. Let's also test a few other things. Is a scalpel conscious or not?
No, but again, it's a process in consciousness.
Is a magnetic field conscious?
I don't think so.
Okay. Why is it then that we are having this disagreement? Because here's the thing. We're saying I can take a resonating magnetic field and change a person's experiences. By putting them in an MRI machine and correctly oscillate a magnetic field can actually change their intersubjective feelings. That is something you just agreed is non-conscious, changing your consciousness. Paul, I don't know if your phone is asleep again.
So, sorry about that.
Okay.
I don't believe that it has to be conscious itself in order to be itself a process in consciousness. So, to give you an example of something internal, your hunger, something that you experience as a process in consciousness, that doesn't mean that your hunger itself is conscious. You're experiencing that hunger. It's
okay.
Your body's way of telling you to go and get food. That's a process in consciousness.
And mind you, all of that can be explained completely in materialistic, non-conscious ways. Interactions between the gut and the brain, ultimately.
It can be explained that way. Yeah, it can be explained.
So
that
then
way.
there's nothing there's nothing that idealism is helping explain. It's just saying, but it is somehow mentally fundamental.
So we're now on the subject of explanatory power. We've moved on a bit from parsimony. And I think that there are things that idealism can explain, which materialism struggles with. For example, where are we on the materialist theory of consciousness?
Actually making pretty good progress. Again, change the brain, change the mental state.
Okay. But what is it that's changing the brain? If it's just process and consciousness interacting with each other under idealist assumptions, or if you make no assumptions whatsoever.
Paul, your phone just again decided to shut up. Oh, boy. I'm sorry, your phone is fighting both of us tonight. Are you there, Paul? Oh, no, we may have lost him completely.
It says he's still on the line. Paul, if you're still there, this is your chance. Ball going once. Ball going twice. I think we lost Paul.
Darn.
Yeah. Well, it was fun. Listen, you were cooking, and I didn't want to get in the way. I was letting you have there was a lot there that you were onto some shit.
I was trying to poke around there. I was trying to see if he was going to go full panpsychism, because I have a physics argument why that can't work, even though they say all of physics is consistent with it. But well, I'm a professional physicist, so I don't think so.
Right.
Yeah.
Oh man.
Yeah. I think the best way to put it is this: materialistic explanations for everything in physics has worked well, and then when we see, hey, those same processes are happening inside your skull, that should be the default.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm fine with that.
Wow, that was a great clip we just watched. Hey, Eve, what should the people do now?
Leave a comment, click like, subscribe, patreon.com/ does that say call the line?
But if you could have we could just make it a little more natural. On the next clip, the outro will be much better.